Welcome back to the Formula Podcast. I am your friendly host, Trevor Carlson. On the Formula Podcast, I've spent years interviewing people from around the world, sharing their perspectives, habits, routines, experience on building a successful or fulfilling life. On this episode, I sit down with Eric Sutfin from Zeal. We talk about how you can become a digital nomad if you're somebody who's interested in working and traveling around the world. We also talk about the impact of digital nomads on local communities, the pros and cons of that, as well as how his business helps digital nomads, potentially you, find good spots and help you be able to support those local communities while you're there. This is my first interview in quite some time, so if it's, I hope you enjoyed. I hope I did Eric justice by asking him some good questions and sharing his and getting him to share his perspective and experience on things. But without further ado, let's get on to the show. All right, Eric, thanks for joining me on the show today. Really appreciate you stopping by. And over email, we are kind of talking about like your favorite travel story, and it sounded like there's maybe a little bit more to it than what you sent over in the email. So I'm curious, and just to give the listeners some context, like what's like when you think of your like favorite or most fun travel story to tell, what is it?
Well, thanks for having me, Trevor. Glad to be on the show here. And there's so many, but I think the one you're referencing that comes top of mind is my experience in Chile. I have always been adventurous and, through Boy Scouts and the like, seen the world. But it was in college that I got to study abroad, of course, while everyone was on protest in Chile. And so really being able to tap in and see the community through the eyes of the locals, being able to not just learn the language, but, the culture and the values and, what makes them tick was what fascinated me. We got a really unique experience as a small group of Americans down there at that time when, the students in higher education were protesting for their values. We think it's expensive in the States. It was like 3 to 4 times that. And so the barrier to entry for people to get higher education was extremely high and limited a lot of people from being able to get those opportunities and to be able to get the jobs thereafter. And so, spending not just a matter of weeks, but a matter of months, being able to travel from the San Padre de Atacama Desert, through the capital city, all the way down to Patagonia after our trip and spending 3 to 4 weeks, hiking Patagonia and Chalten and the like was just an unbelievable experience to be able to really understand, how politics, how culture, how everything is shaped and influenced, and get to kind of really get that immersive experience and see behind the veil of how culture is shaped and then how you walk with that. How when you leave a place, how does that influence and shape your own ideology and your own values and what you bring back home with you, and how that has a ripple effect thereafter. And I think that was really the catalyst for me to see what travel in that light looks like versus the leisure, stay and play type of vacation that so much of us are accustomed to.
Yeah, I'm sure that experience had to be just very eye-opening, because it's when there's like protests and like a lot of unrest going on, it's probably like you probably have people back home that are like, yo, are you okay? Like, you're like, yeah, I mean, it's happening somewhere, but not like on my doorstep, So what do you think, like having that experience, whether it was seeing the unrest in Chile or, hiking Patagonia, and what was the other place you said?
The high country San Padre de Atacama Desert. It's the high desert in the north part of Chile.
Okay. So I can't remember everything you just said with that, but hiking that area and like the northern the northern area of Chile, seeing all those things, what do you think it was like when you think back to that time? Like, how did that change your perspective on Like, did it change your perspective in any way, or how did it impact you like moving forward?
I recall at the time definitely it being eye-opening, being able to see and ask, the locals, the residents, what their experience was, right, and what they thought of, politics or the commercialism down there, how things were evolving and changing, from the mines that collapsed and what it, mining down there to the political school system and all of that. We got to, get some great answers from a variety of kind of the host families in a really unique kind of vulnerable space where they could be transparent with us that you otherwise might not get. But even then, I don't think the magnitude or the depth of it hit until you're able to take that back home, until you're able to go and have, some space as a separation, and you're able to reflect on it and kind of compare and contrast, what that experience and looks like and how that shapes their lives versus what your home life when you return back to kind of normalcy looks like. And then, how do you start to integrate some of those ideas, some of those values? One of the small things that I took from that, over 10 years ago, still to this day, that I love that they did is they said hello to every single person when they walked in the room, and they said goodbye to every single person before they left. Very small gesture, but it wasn't just a, hello, goodbye. Like, it was a personal look them in the eye, connect, you're not sure when you're going to see them again. And just, that resonated with me. And I still love to be able to do that versus the, Irish goodbye or just not acknowledging people. And so I think, there's things like that still have permeated into my lifestyle today beyond a lot of socioeconomic and cultural value things that undoubtedly have influenced my journey and then the work that we're doing and helping people go remote and have these experiences themselves.
Yeah. So you said you are the guy now who, when people are coming in and out of a room, you make sure and say hi and goodbye to everyone?
Yeah, no doubt. I think for me, it's really important to be able to make that connection with people, whether you know them or newly, or you've been friends with them for a long time.
It's so interesting. Like, I haven't been to South America, but I spent like 6 months in Mexico last year, just kind of traveling around to different cities like San Cristobal, Oaxaca, Puerto Escondido, a lot of the like southwest side. And there's just a different, like, when you start getting into like Latin America, and I'm guessing it sounds kind of similar in Chile, where it's like the friendliness and the openness is just very different than like in the US. Were you based in the US?
Home base is Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people get that here too. They're like, oh, it's so welcoming in comparison to, the East Coast or some other places. But I found even for me, you go to some of these Latin American destinations and it's humbling how welcoming they are. It's very cool, the values that they have and want to share those cultural beliefs and customs with others, even if it's just for a night as you're passing through town. How welcome they are to have you at their table.
Yeah it's a very, I imagine that's got to be a very unique experience. Has it impacted how you, like, how do I say this, where it's like, if you're in like Latin America and somebody invites you over for dinner, it's very fun experience where everybody's like very social, and I don't know, it's like family style. It's something that, like, before I went to that part of the world, or even like Asian communities, I hadn't really experienced a lot of. Has that impacted how, like, do you throw dinner parties like that now, like trying to emulate like your experience in Chile, or how has that impacted your like social life from there?
I think it's really hard to recreate that environment. I think a lot of the ideas of just how do you create that safe space that's welcoming, how do you be cordial, how do you create awesome food and conversation that it doesn't ostracize people. It accepts everyone for who they are. I think one of the common denominators across the board there is that they just see people as people, regardless of background, beliefs, values. It doesn't turn into a conversation. They don't try to pick apart someone for who they are and where they've come. They're accepting, even though they probably have their own ideas about Americans and our values and our politics. They leave those at the door, and they just accept you for you and recognize you're not everyone else in that society, but they celebrate. I think is what we're kind of getting to, is they celebrate you for them. And yeah, absolutely, whether it's happy hours or dinners, it's really hard to recreate that, but I think it's something I enjoy, is trying to be able to find the joy and what makes the person I'm sitting across from unique. How do we get to hear about them and their story? Because that's ultimately, I think, what they are great at, is celebrating and enjoying your presence in that moment.
Yeah, man, I'm thinking about it's like it's such a hard feeling to put into words, where you're like, it almost just feels like they're just always celebrating, where it's I think about, it was a friend of mine's birthday in San Cristobal, and it was just I made friends with some locals and some other expats, and we had a little birthday party. And the locals were almost more excited that it was this other guy's birthday than he was. And they did a big thing. Apparently they smash your face into the cake at some point after you sing happy birthday. And it was just it was such a special experience that they made it that great. It almost feels like they're making every day worth celebrating, or every important moment worth celebrating.
I think that's what we're talking around the same thing, which is they're really good at being present, at being able to enjoy whoever and whatever moment they're currently in, and the values that have led to that. They just are fulfilled and cherish those moments, because I think they see how precious they are, and they're not inundated with all the other stories and media and unnecessary extracurriculars that we often so preoccupy ourselves with. And I think that is some of the differences in our cultures. But yeah, it's one of the things I think the lesson is the ability to be ever present and enjoy those moments and cherish those little things, those little moments in time, because they are what are just so memorable. And I think that they thrive and weave that into the fabric of their culture, because family and connection, each other, are so important.
Yeah. And so, speaking of stories, I want to hear your backstory, your origin story, from how. So, we were connected over email because you're working on this new startup, Zeal Remote. But it sounds like you have kind of an interesting origin story before starting there. So I'd like to hear, how did you end up in this in the agency that you're CMO of, and then how did you end up why did you start this new company? I feel like running one business is enough, or being CMO of one business is a lot of work. Starting up another one just seems like a momentous effort. So I would like to hear more about that.
It undoubtedly is, but my passion has consistently been to help others more effectively share their story, to be able to get their passions appropriately out into the world. I believe one of my gifts is being able to connect the dots and build the strategies and share others' stories more effectively to a broader audience. That we all often have our own gifts, and a lot of people say they're not creative. And for me, I'm extremely creative in being able to craft and tell that. And so I really get fired up by being able to better share others' stories, to be able to help them do it justice, because we often travel, as you've seen, to these immaculate places, lots of hospitality, great experience offline, but how do you share that online? How do you tell that story, that art and science of not giving too much color where you can't see yourself in it, and then having it be so vague that you're not sure whether this is a place or a hotel or whatnot that you want to stay at? And so I found myself, as I started traveling for work, just being able to, work remotely, running this marketing agency that helped lifestyle brands and do employer branding and do web design. I had these skills, and then I would go to these places and, see in Santa Teresa that unbelievable experience, great culture, yet the communities and the hotels that I was staying at weren't appropriately able to share and convey that. Whether I'm in literally the next city over in Montezuma, I'm like trying to decide where I'm going to be able to go to, and I can't book a hotel for the next night because it's a contact form and there's no real-time availability. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I can get there more quickly and go and see, whether over a lunch, this is the place I want to stay at before I'm going to get a response. Like, this is 2019, this is 2018. Yeah. Like, you got to be kidding me. How do we share from a few kilometers to a few hundred miles away? Like, this is the experience that you're in for and that you're going to be able to get. Yeah. And so that's where the journey started. And through COVID, we saw that remote work is here to stay, right? It is through technology and connection, we found that the current ecosystem has changed, and we have the tools at our disposal to be able to have this conversation wherever we are in the world, and work as effectively, if not more, than without the distractions of the office. And so we saw that beyond just helping our hotel connections and helping brands share the story, that there was really a business. There was really a way to craft the experience the way from our life experience, travel experience. How do we do it the way we want? How do we, like we were talking just a few moments ago, how do we help decide what's next? How do you tap into a destination in a matter of days instead of weeks? How do you find the places tailored to you and the experience you want to have? Because they're not all the same. And so that really is what led us to see that Zeal was not just a campaign in supporting these destinations and hotels, but it was its own entity. And so we've been standing that up concurrently because it complements everything that we do and are passionate about.
Yeah. So you mentioned you're a very creative person. Where do you think that came from?
I feel like I've always had that creative bug, even as a kid, whether that expression was creating, something out of nothing or deconstructing a bunch of stuff around the house and putting together something completely new. I kind of have always had that interest in being able to, I always say, create something out of nothing. It's funny when people say that you can't, because we do it all the time. I think it's just a matter of perspective. But I think that was instilled from a very young age, being around, creative household and, finding my own expression of that, over time.
So you said you grew up in a creative household. Were your parents creative? Like, were they business owners? Like, what did that? You mentioned the household. Like, what was that? What was the influence there?
Yeah, my mom was always creative. She certainly influenced that more so than my dad, being far more kind of strategic and analytical. But it was good to have the balance in the household. But my mom was always the one that, was creating unique things for birthdays or the holidays for family and friends and neighbors. So that kind of creative expression certainly influenced and probably rubbed off on me in different capacities. But, I also was, a Boy Scout. We had one of the more active kind of troops, which was really fun, being able to go from places like the bottom of the Grand Canyon to, kayaking and some crazy boats in Key West and Pacific Northwest. I got to kind of see, start to see the world at a very young age, and kind of have that exposure as well, was kind of instilled in me. So, I think being around those environments, certainly influenced, kind of shaped that creativity and desire to kind of see the world through, a different lens.
When you were, so what you mentioned before was as you kind of had the inspiration for starting Zeal Remote. Was there a moment where you were like, I don't know, I hate to call it like an aha moment, but a moment where you realized that this could be a real thing. This is a good idea. I have this problem too. And then I guess maybe to back up one step, do you have like a 1 or 2 sentence like description or pitch of what exactly Zeal Remote is? Just so if somebody were to listen to this show and want to know what it is, how would they describe it? Or how would you describe it to them?
Yeah, for the listeners, I would share that Zeal is really the only social remote work app that is going to create a seamless, personalized global experience, allowing you or employers to be able to live and work wherever you desire. We are centralizing and crowdsourcing the thought leadership, the resources, the destinations, the brands that enable and empower you to remote work more easily and effectively. So you have the time and autonomy to play and get connected to the experiences that are tailored to your lifestyle, and then share those with, a broader community of like-minded individuals, globally and locally to tap into. And
that means they're able to, so through the app, like, so if I have Zeal Remote on my phone right now, if let's say I'm in Mexico City or something, I would be able to see where other people like me have worked from, stayed. Basically, it's like tailored recommendations through crowdsourcing other users, or how do you get that information?
Yeah, imagine, like Google Maps or Instagram, TripAdvisor. It's kind of the best of all of those tapped into one app that you're able to see these different businesses, these different experiences. You yourself can then post, a video or a photo saying, hey, while you're in Puerto Escondido, you got at this beach, go and visit Maria. She's got unbelievable empanadas, but only on Thursday nights. And then come to the awesome market on Sundays, because it's, an experience that you'll get to, tap into amazing local artists and artisans and food that you otherwise wouldn't get. So how do you get to see those experiences, right? It's like going to be all in an app at your fingertips to be able to then yourself, as you travel, document and share it with the rest of the world. And ultimately that profile will personalize. If you like scuba or your girlfriend likes, the spa, you'll get more of that.
It sounds like a highly tailored, specific resource because it's like, if there's different types of people who travel around. There's like the vacationer who maybe is like doing more resort stuff, and then there's people who are doing like digital nomad things where they're spending a month or two, or there's expats. It's like where they're doing like few years. So this sounds like it's more to the people who are kind of like in that midterm stay versus like someone on vacation. So it's like, and I feel like it's probably a very specific type of people in that category probably have very specific type of things they want to experience in comparison to the others.
Yeah, the needs are different. Undoubtedly, the leader traveler might want to be able to get away from the resort and kind of off the grid, off the top 10 lists, and tap into the community. And this would be a great way for them. But undoubtedly, when you're staying in a destination for more than a few weeks and you kind of exhausted all the local restaurants right around you, you want to and have a different set of needs, right? You've got to do laundry. You don't want to eat out all the time. You want to be able to start tapping into local cafes and events, and not still be in the kind of tourist hotspots. Nothing wrong with those, but as you live in a destination, you want to be able to immerse yourself into it more and experience it as a local resident would. And so this certainly allows you to access and tap into these different experiences and destinations more so easily than you would through some of the other applications and tools that are out there, because it's also constantly evolving, right? One of the hardest parts is, what are those local events, music, food, marketplaces, the like? How are you able to start to connect and interface with the local residents or other like-minded travelers that have a affinity towards yoga or scuba more easily? And so this helps facilitate that connection for that more immersive traveler that wants to get tapped in, if you will. So yeah. And that's
sounds
where kind of this
sounds awesome.
Came from, right? Is we always ask when you start to travel, what's next? Where do I go? What's open? And especially post COVID, a lot of the places that were open now aren't. So much of it's not real time, or the information is incomplete, and you can spend a lot of wasted time trying to be able to go and find that experience. And yet we have the tech and tools to just integrate it and crowdsource and share all of that with one another, so that we don't have to recreate the wheel, so that we can more easily get the experiences that fit our lifestyle. So Zeal is being built and developed and crowdsourced for that aim, for that purpose, is to help make it easier for everyone by sharing everyone's experiences.
Yeah. So you find, so I'm guessing that there's probably some type of partnership, like with like the boutique. You guys, I feel like you guys kind of have an in already. You have these boutique hotels that you could maybe be like, yo, we're rolling out an app that'll help your guests have a better experience while they stay here. Are you guys down? So I feel like you guys kind of have like a little cheat code there that'll help with adoption. Am I right? Or
yeah, one of the biggest pain points for current digital nomads living this lifestyle is the loneliness. When you're staying at Airbnbs or short and long-term rentals, tapping into that community is harder. And so whether it's through hotels, through some of the event centers, these co-working destinations and cafes, or just the ability to autonomously create these events and retreats or experiences to connect with other like-minded travelers in and around the area. We do kind of have a pulse on what are the hubs to help facilitate that experience, and how do you bridge that for travelers and existing kind of local residents to connect and share those more easily and more effectively. But undoubtedly, kind of the hotels are one of the connections that we have. And it's funny because there is a discrepancy in, you often don't find people staying there for long periods of time, but it is where, a lot of community and connection is made when you're staying for shorter periods of time. So certainly, in kind of off seasons or shorter seasons, it's easier to stay there for a longer period of time and still get all the amenities, still kind of get the luxury of having that experience while, starting to kind of break bread and tap into the community as you get your bearings, as you start to understand where do you want to stay in this city or region for a longer period of time.
Yeah. How long have you been, you've been like digital nomading now for a bit, haven't you?
Yeah, for 6 or 7 years.
Nice. So I'm sure you've heard this a lot. I certainly have, where people are like, yo, how do I do that? How do I work and travel? How are you able to go to these places? What do you tell those people when they're like, hey, Eric, I saw you went to Chile for a while or somewhere. How are you able to like work and like pay or work and travel to these places? How are you able to pay your bills and go to these extravagant spots? I want to do what you do. What do you tell those people?
Well, certainly you have to have a job and a boss that is open to this type of culture, that understands you can do the same work autonomously, asynchronously, just by having better communication, milestones set in place, agreements as far as what does that look like and how are you able to track success. And that's, certainly one of the first kind of mutual understandings that needs to exist unless you're your own business owner. And then you need to have, those with your contractors and your partners and clients set in place, time zones and communication structures and the like. But then my next piece of encouragement is try it on. I think that there's a notion out there that that digital nomading, that being a remote worker, means you're up and leaving home for years at a time. And I see a lot of people, successful business owners, go and do this, from Puerto Rico for a cold winter. They want to get out of Iowa or Minnesota and go, get warm. And so they'll do it even from the Keys and Florida, that there's now a whole subset of van life people to try this on for a few weeks. Take a 1 week conference and that you're going to go to and spend another week on either end of it, being able to experience the destination. Try on what does it look like to have your laptop and to work through some of these processes. There's no tried and true kind of hard answer to it. Just like kind of how we all use different technologies and processes and emails, you're going to find what works for you. There's certainly the idea that like Zeal is going to be able to share a lot of these so that you can kind of shorten that learning curve and get insight from how others are doing it. But it's going to take a little bit of trial and tribulation, and just like anything in life, you'll learn along the way, but it's going to be well worth it. But you don't have to, dive into the deep end of the pool without, any experience. So you can go to even someplace, locally, the mountains or somewhere just for an extended period of time without feeling like you need to completely make, the immersion into this lifestyle.
So if you had to break that down into like a step one, what would that step one be?
Commit that this is something that you're at least open-minded to trying on, that you're going to learn a lot in the process, and you'll see if this is a lifestyle that you're even open to doing for extended periods of time. Whatever that looks like for you. Could be a few weeks, could be a few months, could be something that you completely lean into and, leverage your home and car as an asset and go live abroad for years at a time. Who knows? But at least be open-minded to saying, this is something, I'm willing to get out of my comfort zone of my own home and, surround myself with a community and see if it is for me or not.
Do you think there's any reason why somebody shouldn't pursue that lifestyle?
I don't believe it is for everyone. Certainly, there's a lot of kind of adventures, let's say, to put it kindly. There's going to be a lot of learning lessons that are uncomfortable, that you've got to get yourself out there. Not that I don't meet a lot of introverts that are still digital nomading and live this lifestyle. There are. But undoubtedly, if you have, a 9-to-5, if you have a job that requires you to be at the office because you're in manufacturing, let's say, or you're doing some sort of physical labor like moving, it's going to be really tough to be able to take that and translate that skill elsewhere. Though, plumbers, electricians, there's certainly kind of other welders that I've seen, those skills and crafts that you could pick up and take in high demand to other parts of the world and, bring that skill and trade for a matter of weeks or months to a new destination and start to tap in to that lifestyle. So it's not that you can't, it's just understanding how can you, and if it's for you. I also like to remind, even coming from marketing, there are brainstorming strategies, that rolling out a new product. There are times when having in-person whiteboarding time to be able to collaborate and be in the same room and have that creative energy is way more effective than trying to do it virtually, piecemealing and having distractions and whiteboarding, online. It's definitely something that we even bring our team together, quarterly from around the world to have that FaceTime to be able to build that connection. So it's not something to completely replace, what you're doing. There is, healthy balance to being able to understand how to effectively asynchronously work. So I wouldn't say there's people that it's not for, but I think it is something, again, that it's got to be suitable for your lifestyle and for your needs. Certainly I see people with young kids and families, so like to live this lifestyle. So you can't, it's not to say that young or old, you can't do it. It's just, is it going to be advantageous and complementing and making you happy in your lifestyle and your journey?
Yeah, I definitely think I tend to agree that there's certain types of people that it like lends itself to, and then there's certain types of people that it doesn't. I think I don't know. I think it's very strange when people would say something like, everybody should be doing this. It's like, no. Like, you need some level of self-awareness to know what'll make you happy. Also, if you are working like a 9 to 5 where you have to be online, flying to Thailand and working from a 12-hour like flipped time zone is probably not going to be super fun. It's probably going to be pretty awful.
Yes. Yep.
So I think it's like being aware of like your own preferences, what you like and don't like. If it's something for you, if you don't want to spend that much time away from friends or family, and also if your job allows it. So it's definitely not a one size fits all, but like you said, like taking it for like a test drive if you're not sure, is always a good place to start.
Yeah, some people will then get the bug and they get hooked, and others don't. But I think that balance, right, is where it's key, finding that for you. For some people, it might be going for a few weeks at a time. For others, it could be a few months, while still maintaining your home base. But
yeah, yep. What do you think that moment was for you that hooked you?
I go back to Chile, but really it was Mexico. Even through all my travels. No, it was Costa Rica. There's a lot, right?
Yeah.
No, certainly one of the bigger milestones in that, was post-COVID. We got out of our office downtown Denver with things changing, and saw that we wanted to completely go remote ourselves, and we went and worked out of Tulum, Mexico, supporting some hotels reopen up. We were one of the few that were able to get in, and everyone else wasn't quite sure how we navigated it. Even the locals that we met working their way back up from South and Central America that couldn't quite make it back stateside because of all the regulations. We saw everyone kind of struggling, and how do they remote work? How did they effectively live this lifestyle? And, we were having a blast doing this, 3 days a week, and still being more effective than we were, in the office, leading some cool charges. And we saw, that this was the lifestyle that we wanted. We had an absolutely amazing time, and that was kind of the aha, was we can not just live this lifestyle, but we can help spearhead and facilitate and share the experience of how to for others. I think was the biggest aha. Was in Tulum during COVID.
I was thinking of like Tulum in Mexico, and I have maybe a bit more. So I have like two real like follow-up like questions that I want to ask. This one's maybe a bit more controversial, but I think it's really important. One thing I've seen a lot of, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, is as some of these places become more popular with digital nomads that have higher income, they have higher discretionary spending abilities. I think you probably know where I'm going with this. But they have the ability to when they come, and a large group of digital nomads comes into a place like Portugal or certain cities in Mexico, they kind of change the real estate market. They change a lot of things, so it's not affordable for the locals. What are your thoughts on that? And I struggle a little bit with that, where I'm like going somewhere, I'm like, damn, am I like gentrifying the local population? Like and I don't know what to do other than like support local places. I don't just want to stay home, but how do you go and have these experiences and also support the local community? I guess is like the baseline of the question.
I see and hear that conundrum undoubtedly, right? It is, are you a conscious traveler, and how do you have intent in where you're going? Certainly, they are making it easier to understand when you're staying at more kind of eco or sustainable developments, whether that be hotels or short-term rentals. But yeah, undoubtedly have I seen the real estate and landscape in Tulum drastically change over even the last 5 years. Yes, and it's in part really sad, and in part it can be a good thing for the community. But no doubt, are some of the cenotes in the water ecosystems underneath there being polluted? 100%. Is the congestion on that main road down through there changing? Yes. Is the pricing certain people out? For sure. So the balancing act of how are you able to do that and influence that as a traveler to shape the local economy and politics is a really tough thing. That's more of a local political issue, but the decisions that we make as travelers certainly impact that, right? Where you stay, the type of restaurants you go to, and that can be really tough, right? It takes a lot more research and understanding. Are you going to someplace that is sourcing local food? What are their, fishing practices, and how are they? It puts more of a burden on you, right? But it's understanding and starting to, I think, ask some of those important questions when you are traveling, and then also to the local residents. I think having that communication, that feedback loop, being able to be okay and understanding and expressing that, that is a concern, and voicing that up. Even then, as you're talking with the waitress or the then kind of general manager, that has a ripple effect in and of itself. But I think that the first part is, I think, undoubtedly being intentional and aware that there is that byproduct. The Riviera Maya over the last several decades has grown massively, right? We saw Cancun back in the 80s, then Playa del Carmen started coming up in the 90s. Tulum has started now to see its heyday and it's growing. Bacalar is going to be soon next. So, part of, tourism and the growth is just that, is that it's shaping the development of these destinations, ultimately, hopefully for the better. But yeah, there's a lot of byproducts of that growth. How, as we can, as travelers, as stewards of community, be more intentional about impacting that, I think, is where tapping into these destinations when you are staying there for longer periods of time, being conscious and intentional, asking these questions, where you're going and the like, does have ultimately a difference, because it's going to shape then your future decisions of where do you go and how do you do that. Growth isn't always bad. It's how is that growth intentional? How is it in a way that is symbiotic with the local community? How are they also able to benefit from it than just having, the next newest thing, have money thrown at it? How are they able to maintain their cultural values? How are they able to support their families? There's a lot that goes into it, but I think the more time you spend in these places, you can have a little bit of a say on that, but it's certainly a conundrum that exists. Honestly, our hope with Zeal is to be able to use a lot of this traveler data that Google and TripAdvisor are already getting, but how do we use it intentionally ourselves to be able to help shape and influence that? How can we figure out the best practices and what's working, what's not working? How do we perhaps renovate a place instead of completely build a new one? How do we learn from traveler behavior and the trends to be able to shape and influence, some of the local politics and commercial development and resource aggregation to be more effective and to take into consideration not just what the travelers want, but the local residents and infrastructure. It's a complicated issue, but it is certainly one that we're going to have to address sooner than later.
Yeah, I think that, there's a lot of these companies that have popped up that are like intentional based travel companies. Like they're usually like locally owned. I think there's a lot of organizations out there. I think it's like Intrepid or something like that, where they're like highlighting locally owned, locally run, locally supporting trips and things like that. So I definitely think that you're right. You're right on. Like, I think you hit the nail on the head with being intentional about it. It can be hard though, because you don't always know where, like, who owns this thing that you're staying at, where they're getting, like, is the labor getting paid fairly? Like, it's, some of that information is not available, and it's very hard to know for sure. But I think if you have the intention and you try and you put in some effort, it probably goes a long ways.
Undoubtedly, it's like even in America, the shop small business, right? When you can go and shop and support the local kind of smaller mom and pops and businesses, that's going to go a lot further in creating jobs and economic impact than it is in continuing to give resources to some of the bigger boys that perhaps are less intentional and scrupulous with those funds and what they do. So, I think that the simplest way is just to try to support local and whatever that means, right? Going to those off the beaten path restaurants, laundromats, hotels. And part of that comes from, again, just, as you get there, asking the questions, being able to get a sense from the local community, bartenders, the like, what does that look like? And then, putting your money where your mouth is and going and having those experiences than just, staying at the big hotels.
Yeah, it's, I just feel like the experience is so much better though, too. When you're like, when you find that place that's like not on Google Maps, like somebody at the hotel or hostel or Airbnb is like, yeah, this is where we go get, like, from like Mexico, this is where we go get like tacos from, or whatever. Or you're like walking down the street and you find like a food cart that's got, I can't even remember the name of the food, but it's like the corn with the cheese and the chili powder on it. And you can't find that on Google Maps. And it's like somebody that just lives right down the street and they've been selling this for years. And like that experience is just like those types of things I feel like make a trip. Whereas if you're just like, oh, I'm going to stay at this place, and it's kind of like tailored, like that story is not as interesting as the unique one that nobody else could really replicate from like an online guide. Right.
100%. Yeah. And, it reminds me of this unbelievable to-go meal that we had in Barbados from, this little garage. This lady would serve to a lot more of the, local taxi drivers and the like that were on the go. She'd set it up on the side of the road, and like you'd have no idea to go there, but it was one of the best, chicken and potatoes, and like you wouldn't get that experience or be pointed that direction otherwise. But those are the ones that are memorable and just change your experience of how are you eating and tapping into the local ecosystem. So those are what we're trying to share and elevate and kind of reinforce and drive people to more of, and that happens by being able to kind of bring light to those and the power of that through community.
For sure. And I really, I think you guys, what you're working on is really cool. And if you can definitely help those types of local businesses and experiences get highlighted, then I think that's a huge win. So you're a pretty accomplished person. You've been a digital nomad for a long time. You have one successful business and you're working on starting a second one. So like, my question is, do you have some, like, as you're going through life and making these different decisions, do you have a specific framework or like a value system or something that kind of helps kind of guide you like with what you're doing? So is it like when I think of myself, I think of a book by Viktor Frankl. It's like Man's Search for Meaning. If I was, 85 years old, looking back on this moment, what do I wish I would have done? I try to do that. Not always perfect on it, but that's like mine. I'm wondering if you have something similar or if there's like a certain approach you take.
Yeah, great question. And as cliche as it might sound, I'll try to take a non, cliche out of the box version, but it's a notion of following the passion, right? For me, I had a great friend and mentor shared the notion that when you light yourself on fire, people will come for miles to watch you burn. And, the idea of what sets you on fire, what's going to get you out of bed, and how is pursuing that passion going to create the ripple effect. And so for me, it's understanding and seeing, the output, the byproduct of that. And for me, that's what gets me out of bed. That's what sets me on fire to create and help share other people's passions. When I can see, a way for them to convey that, to be able to share that, to be able to increase the impact of their story and what they're creating. And I can help guide and facilitate and connect the dots for them to do that. That lights me up. And so for me, the basis of my decisions is that something that is going to one, excite me and make me happy, and two, is it going to have a bigger impact beyond my immediate sphere. On my phone, what I have here is inspiration and impact through travel, and for me, that is the simplest way that I like to be able to influence the world is how are those experiences? How is that larger than ourselves? Because that's what we're here for, and so that's kind of the common denominator and basis for kind of my operating system, if you will.
That's awesome, man. I think that's a really good way to think through. I've never heard that before, where if you light yourself on fire, people come from hundreds of miles away to watch you burn. That's interesting, because it could be taken a few different ways, like in a very positive way, and one that you're like, damn, that's that's a little dark. But I think from the positive side, like you said, pursuing your passion, lighting yourself on fire to do what you feel like you were, I don't know how you want to say it, put here to do, what you feel like your purpose is in any of those statements. I think that's a really important thing, where it's kind of funny how when you start going down that path, things kind of start to happen in a way that's like, it feels very lucky or fortunate. You know what I mean? It's like,
I like to say the universe will give you winks. It makes sure that you're on the right direction, and it continues to kind of reinforce that you're headed down that path. And so, I don't find those to be coincidences at all. I find those to be, affirmations or confirmations that you're where you're supposed to be. But undoubtedly, when you kind of tap into that flow, when you are able to be present and show up with integrity in that capacity, the world and universe seems to find ways to continue to support you in that.
This is a bit of a different approach, but what do you do when you feel like you're not on that path? Like the winks you're getting are not positive ones.
So we had a mentor, who works with some of the largest, Fortune companies and private equity groups. He consults out of Denver here as well. He's got a remote team, and his methodology is, declare to do unbelievable, incredible things. You have to declare the unreasonable, launch the missile, and be a rhino. And those are kind of his three methodologies. And so that middle part of, after you've declared the unreasonable, launching the missile, is the thing where you're just irreverent. You might not always be on the path, but I find when you're off the path, that self-correction, you're getting guidance that you're not, right? It's like being sick. It's your body telling you that you're out of alignment, that you're out of whack. And so, I think it's easy to perhaps get frustrated or to, see it and be deterred. But I think if you take the perspective that it's just like putting your hand on the stove, it's a sign that says, hey, you're out of alignment. This isn't where you're supposed to be. Course correct, get back on path. And you're never going to be 100% on target, but, it's making smaller and smaller variations so that you are. And then being like a rhino and being, reverent, having thick skin and continuing to just be steadfast moving forward. So you create unreasonable things and massive impacts in the world. So, I think it's just that reminder that you need to course correct.
Hell yeah. I've never heard any of those three things before. So that's great. So it was declare the unreasonable, launch the missile, be a rhino. Yes, that's great. Well, I think that's an excellent place to wrap this up. Do you have any final messages, anything that you'd like to say to the audience as we wrap up the show?
Well, I would encourage you to take whatever that next step is on your journey. If Zeal Remote, the community of like-minded travelers there, can be a resource for you to leverage in that exploration, you can follow us at zealremote.com or Instagram at zealremote. And encourage you to share your experience and support others in their journey as well, whatever that looks like for you.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me again, Trevor.
That is a wrap for this episode. Really hope that you enjoyed our conversation, and maybe you learned a little bit too that if you want to travel the world and work and see these different places while keeping your job, you can maybe feel a little inspired or educated to do it now. Now, if you enjoyed the show, please drop a comment if you're watching on YouTube. Leave a review on iTunes. It helps people like you find the show and maybe learn a thing or two about designing their own ideal life. That's all. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Ciao, everyone.